I'm Bill Morris with Habitat Magazine, and with me today is Peter Barcelona of RAND Engineering and Architecture. And Peter, you guys work on a lot of older buildings, including a lot in the historic districts around town, which present peculiar problems. These are odd beasts. You've got a job going on now down on Lower Fifth Avenue, I believe. Tell me a little bit about the building and the work.
33 Fifth Avenue is a building on the corner of East 10th Street and Fifth Avenue. It was built in the 1920s. Classic pre-war construction, fire-rated construction. Has a pretty old piping system. In this case, they have some old cast iron stormwater drainage pipes that run through the building that collect stormwater down from the roof and terraces and bring it to the cellar level piping to be drained out to the street. But like any older buildings, their piping system is starting to get old, and they ran into a particularly bad problem where one of the storm risers in an apartment line that actually transfers through an apartment line collapsed and caused significant damage to a number of apartments. So the board was faced with a real problem. How do we address this immediately, because all the piping is corroding at the same level and the same degradation was found? So they had to do something immediately. We had to replace the piping. And normally co-ops, they would replace the piping in kind. You would open up the wall, get to the pipe and replace it. But in this case,
these pipes run through the apartment walls inside the building. Am I right?
Exactly. And that presents real big challenges. You have really fit out, well renovated apartments that you would have to break through tile walls, custom cabinetry, closets. So the significant disruption to everyone in that building, every apartment you would have to enter, all 4 apartment lines would have to be accessed. You would have to open up the walls on each floor in order to adequately access, remove the piping, and then support it. In some cases, the piping is actually located behind other pipes, so you can't even get to it without removing other systems. So massive disruption to the owners in that building.
So this was a time for a little creative thinking, I'm guessing. You guys had to try to come up with a solution that didn't involve invading all these apartments.
Absolutely. We had to come up with a solution that allowed them to still function, right? Because it's not going to stop raining. So I got to keep those systems in place in order to install the new piping. And good Lord, am I really going to go into every one of these apartments to do this? How do I access apartments? How can I do this project without also turning into a high 6 or even a 7-figure project? So we had to come up with something. And the thought process was, well, wait a second. If we're really trying to get from point A to point B, we're on the roof and we need to drain those roofs with stormwater. How do I get it down to the cellar in the most effective way? So the thought process was, well, how about the exterior of the building? Maybe we can run the piping along the outside, the exterior facades down to the cellar, bring it back in at that level, and therefore avoid any work inside the apartments.
Was that doable?
So it turned out to be feasible. We were able to extend the individual drains on the terraces and at the main roof above for the penthouse and bulkheads down to piping that would lead out through to an external riser or leader, we call it. And those leaders would run down to the cellar level. We found 4 locations to locate these risers along the off-street elevations. And that became a kind of an important thing because 33 Fifth Avenue, like many old buildings, is in a landmark district. So we were going to be faced with certain challenges. We're now changing the aesthetic of what the facade could look like. So therefore, we had to either locate the piping or choose materials that would be acceptable to landmarks.
I'm guessing Landmarks Preservation Commission didn't like the idea of a drain pipe running down the front of the building on facing Fifth Avenue.
Certainly not. That would have been dead on arrival. So we had to locate positions. There are 2 main courtyards for 33 Fifth. The south courtyard is kind of concealed. It's inboard. 33 Fifth Avenue is 15 stories high. So the piping is going to be visible, especially when you consider most of the surrounding buildings are smaller townhomes. So we found us a niche in the south courtyard to run 2 lines, as well as along the east-facing courtyard wall. There's a 10-foot wide yard between 33 Fifth Avenue and 4 East 10th Street. So we were able to locate 2 other lines. Granted, one was near a chimney, a corner of where the brickwork forms, still visible if from certain vantage points, but certainly not from the street.
So not so intrusive that the Landmarks Preservation Commission would frown on the placement of that pipe.
Absolutely. And since many other townhomes have external leaders, The issue was picking a material that they would feel acceptable. So we had to review different material options, not just from a cost perspective, but a feasibility of installation and then longevity.
And what'd you decide on? Not
We
cast iron.
That's right. So we looked at different materials such as cast iron, stainless steel, and copper as as the most common forms. We ultimately agreed that copper tubing was the best option. It would discolor over time, give that green patina that you often see in copper leaders.
Now, was the co-op board pleased with the result? I mean, I think they must have saved some money on this solution that you came up with.
Absolutely. We turned into what could have been a real catastrophic hit to their capital plan or capital budget into a job that ended costing $166,000. So you can consider, something well over $500,000, maybe even $1 million when you add up all the interior costs, the disruption, all that into a job that was more manageable. Still a hit, but something that they could actually afford to do quickly and avoid going into apartments.
Well, Peter Barcelona, thanks for sharing that curveball with us, and I'm glad it turned out well for you and the client.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.